Back. Tonight we're going to do a compilation. That means a bunch of different pieces of notes for our area and perimeter. The first one talks about basic figures. These are our one-shaped figures. So here in definition we're going to write one-shaped. There we go. And we're going to write figures. Okay, so they are one-shaped figures. And illustrations could be any of these that are listed here. We could have a rectangle. You could have a square. You could have a circle. You could have a triangle. Any basic shape that you learned back in elementary school by itself. That's called a basic figure. So examples, again, these are going to be words. Square is one. Rectangles. Let's see. Let's move these up a little bit. Oh, we can't move them. Okay. Triangles. Circles. Any basic shape that you can think of would be our words here. A non-example would be if you mashed up more than one shape. A very common one would be if you took something like this. So if we made a rectangle here and then another one here, and the way you would normally see this, let's see if it'll let me do it, is without this piece in the middle. So it kind of looks like an L shape. This would be a non-example of a basic figure because it's actually two figures stuck together. You could have, let's see, a triangle. We could take a triangle and put it on top of a square. That's one I've seen before. And again, it would look like this, except for this middle piece right here would be missing. Okay, you can have them with circles too, or half circles. We could do a rectangle and a circle at the top. And we could try a circle at the bottom. Let me move it. And anyway, the middle piece would be missing. So it would kind of look a little something like that. Right? And this would be connected here and here. So it would be a rectangle with two circles. These are non-examples. These are things that are not basic figures. So that would be the first part of your definition is just, we call this a Freyer model in notes, and it tells us what a basic figure is, what it looks like, some words, and it also gives us examples of what it's not. Then we come to our next piece of information, which is a table to fill out our formulas. Because the cool thing is, in Virginia, we have this nifty formula sheet. And it gives us all the formulas for basic shapes, triangle, square, rectangle, circle, as well as parallelograms and trapezoids. And then if we know these basic formulas, if we have a mashup of a formula, we can take two and put it together. So when we're filling out this table, we want to look at our formula sheet to write the formulas down. And the easiest way for me to do this is to go ahead and use the pencil feature. So a square, if we're looking for the square of the formula of a square, P stands for perimeter, so we have perimeter equals 4S. Each side of a square is labeled with an S, and if we have 4 of them, because squares all have the same sides, right, the same length, then we can just multiply 4 times S. So we come back over here and we would write perimeter equals 4S. For the area of a square, and that's going to follow us, it would be area equals side squared, so side times side. That's the exact same thing as length times width. So we would, we would come back over here and we'll write area equals side squared, just like we were doing in our Pythagorean theorem with the square. Now for rectangles, we have this other one over here, right here, where it says the perimeter is 2. Now that is an L. I've had some students are confused thinking maybe that's a 1, but that's actually an L. So you could make that in a capital L if you wanted. It doesn't matter. So the perimeter would be 2 times the length, because our lengths are the same size, plus 2 times the width, because our widths are the same size. And area equals length times width. And that's something you guys have known for a while. So if we come back over here and fill out our table, perimeter equals, and I'm going to use a capital L just so there's no mistakes, 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. And we already decided our area equals length times width. When they're right beside each other, that means multiplication. The next one is a parallelogram, and this is one that you may not have used that much in the past. The parallelogram is this guy right here, and I'll go ahead and circle it for you. This is a parallelogram. It's a rectangle that does not have the right angles. So see how they have to draw this dotted line? That's for the H. They have to give you a vertical height. The slant height, this guy right here, is not the true height of a parallelogram. You also may notice there is no P. We don't know the perimeter. There's no formula for perimeter. But if you recall, perimeter means all the way around something. So to find perimeter, all you have to do is add up all the sides. Okay, that's what a perimeter is just the addition of all the sides. So now if we go, let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Here we go. If we go back to our table, when we're talking about perimeter, you're going to fill this in as perimeter equals the sum, because remember in math, sum means add, the sum of all sides. A parallelogram has 4 sides, just like a rectangle, so you would have 4 numbers that you would add together. Also, like a rectangle, in a perimeter, the top and the bottom are the same, and left to right are the same. So they may only give you 2 numbers in a parallelogram, but you can add the other 2 so that you can add them all together. The area of a parallelogram is base times height. Again, very similar to length times width. Your base could be your length, and your height has to be that vertical height that we were talking about earlier, this dotted line. So don't use your slant height, because they could give you a number over here, and a lot of kids think, oh, well, that's the height, because they're thinking about a rectangle formula. It has to be the dotted line height, and that would be your H. All right, moving on, the next one we talk about is a triangle. We'll come back here to our formula sheet. A triangle is this guy, the very first one up here. Again, you'll notice there's no perimeter. but a triangle has 3 sides, so we would just add the 3 sides. The area of a triangle is half the base times the height. The reason there's this half right here is because a triangle is technically half of a rectangle, half of a parallelogram. So you make sure that you multiply the base, that's the bottom, times again, the dotted line height. Not a slant height, because these guys could be too different. So how would you know which one to use? That's why they must give you the one that makes that right angle, the dotted line height. So let's go back and fill this out. For our perimeter, it's going to be the same thing we wrote up here. Perimeter is going to equal the sum of all the sides. But again, in a triangle, this is only going to be 3 sides that we add together. Okay, and our area is half. And when you're doing this in your calculator to actually solve problems, you can make that 0.5, but it's half the base times the height. Now for a trapezoid, that's the last one, and again, it may be something that you haven't used a whole lot of. Our trapezoid is right here. And it's a little bit longer of a formula simply because it has 2 bases. The 2 parallel lines, which you can see by the arrows, those are going to be your bases. You're not going to use your slant heights over here because those could be different sizes, and they're not a base, because to be a base, it has to be parallel, meaning they'll never touch. And these two, if you kept them going for forever, they would eventually touch and they wouldn't be a base. So for perimeter, it's a 4-sided figure, right? Trapezoids have 4 sides, so you would just add up all the sides. For area, you want half the height. Again, this is another basic shape where they have to tell you a vertical height. That's a straight up and down line. So half the height times the sum of the bases. And no, it does not matter what you make base 1 or base 2. It's just the sum of the bases. So we'll come back over here. And again, we will write perimeter is the sum of all sides and then the area is going to be half the height times the sum of the bases. So it's just like a triangle, except for to find this B, you have to add 2 bases together. And remember, order of operations says that you have to do the parentheses first. So make sure when you're finding the area of a trapezoid that you add your bases and then you multiply everything else. Just as a side note, B1 and B2, the 1 and 2 don't do anything. It's not like it's a fraction or an integer or a number of any sort. It's just stating there's going to be 2 bases, and they're most likely going to be, well, actually they are always, since it's a trapezoid, going to be different measures. So it's not base plus base, it's going to be base, what they say, sub 1 and base sub 2. Now there's one more that they didn't add on here that is a basic shape that I want you guys to know about, and that's circle. So at the bottom of your paper, I want you to write circle, and we'll go back and take a look at how to find the perimeter and area of a circle. So if you come up here, the last figure on your top row is a circle. Couple cool things about this formula sheet. Number 1, it tells you that the diameter is the one that goes from the top to the bottom, and it tells you the radius is half of that, right? So the radius only goes from the edge of the circle to the center. When we deal with circles, we call the perimeter, right, going all the way around, the circumference. So there is no P equals. they say C equals, because C is circumference, but that is your perimeter of a circle, is a circumference. So there are two ways. If they give you the diameter, that's from edge to edge, then you can just multiply that by pi. If they give you the radius, which is more common, you have to multiply 2 times the radius, right? That would actually give you your diameter, and then multiply it by pi. Please be careful. Only use 3.14 for pi unless the directions tell you differently. Now, to find the area of a circle, we're going to square our radius and multiply it by pi. That is very different than saying 2 times pi, or 2 times the radius. For example, if the radius is 5, 2 times 5 would give me 10, but 5 squared would give me 25. So you need to make sure when do you need to square it, which would be area, versus just multiplying by 2, which is circumference, aka perimeter. So let's take these two formulas and put them back on our table. So for a circle, our perimeter, which is actually C, circumference, is going to equal 2 times pi times the radius. And our area is going to be pi times radius squared. Very important that you have this written down. It's an easy to access formula. And then if you have trouble, recognizing, I don't know, I have a trapezoid, but which one of these is a trapezoid? You have this little table right here with the actual words, so you know what formulas go with what words. All right, so we'll bring up our next sheet. All right, so here is a area and perimeter review of some basic shapes that we need to know about. First, let's look at the perimeter of a triangle. And remember, perimeter means to go around. So we would have just the lengths. The reason I'm making a big deal about this is we are not going to include that 4.2 in our perimeter because that is the dotted line, right? That's your height. We don't need that for perimeter. We just need the lengths of the 3 sides. So I'm going to say perimeter equals, and then I'm going to have my 3 sides. 6 plus 7.5 plus 9. And we add those all together. Grab my handy dandy calculator. Alright, clear that out. And 6 plus 7.5 plus 9. 22.5. Alright, so we're going to come back over here and write 22.5, and we're talking centimeters. So 22.5 centimeters. And that's all it is for perimeter. You literally just add up all the sides. For area, now remember we do have a formula for area. So we come over here to our formula sheet and we find a triangle. And we have area equals half the base times the height. Now just like you learned on the Pythagorean theorem, the very first thing you do is write down the formula. So area equals 1/2 base times height. Okay? And now let's label. So 1/2 stays the same, obviously. Our base is going to be the bottom edge, which is 9. So that's our base. And then please remember, our height has to be that vertical line right here. So 4.2, this is when we use that number. That is our height. Has to be the dotted line. So if we come over here, so step 1, write the formula. Step 2, label your variables. Step 3, plug them in. 1/2 times 9 times 4.2. Since this is all multiplication, you can plug it straight in. So area is going to equal, let me grab my calculator. All right, area is going to equal 1/2. So that's 1 divided by 2, right? 0.5 times 9 times 4.2. 18.9. Excellent. So your area is going to be, ooh, that's a big one. 18, I forgot what it was already. 18.9. There it is. 18.9. And again, we're talking centimeters, but since it's area, it's going to be centimeters squared. We are actually multiplying two dimensions. That's where that little 2 comes from, because we're multiplying base times height. All right, let's look at our parallelogram. Remember, I told you a parallelogram is just a rectangle that kind of leans, doesn't have those right angles to it. The cool thing is, since it is a rectangle, or very similar to it, we know that the top and bottom have to be the same. So I'm going to change my color here so you can see this. But if this is 3 1/4, which is 0.25, right? I can make my top 3.25. And if this length over here is 6.8, I can make this one right here 6.8 as well. And that's going to be helpful for my perimeter, because when we do perimeter, you just add up all the sides. Right now we're not using the 6, because remember that dotted line is your height. So we're not using this 6 right now. We're just using these 4 numbers. So you come down here, perimeter equals, you have 6.8 plus 3.25 plus 6.8 for the other side. So I said 6.8 plus 3.25 plus another 6.8 plus again another 3.25. Okay. Oops, looks like I need to update, don't I? All right, so let's go ahead and grab our calculator. Move it up here this time, clear it out. So we're going to say 6.8 plus 3.25 plus 6.8 plus 3.25. And we get 20.1. Very good, 20.1. So I come down here, perimeter equals 20.1 centimeters. Okay, that's all we do. Anytime you get a shape for perimeter, you just add up all the sides. Now down here you see there's a circle. That'll be a little different, but for everything else you can just add up the sides. If they have straight lines, you just add them up. Area of a parallelogram. We actually have a formula for area, so we would come back over here and we find, it's kind of hard to see with all the writing, but there's our parallelogram right here. It's the first one on the second row, and its area equals base times height. So I'm going to come over here and write down step 1, write the formula. That's the most important thing, or else you won't know what you're plugging in. Base times height. Your base is going to be the bottom. Now if this was flipped on the side, then another number would be the base. But in this case, it's our 3 1/4, 3.25. That's our base. Your height will always be this dotted line. Okay, it has to be the vertical line, so that's going to be your height. And now you just plug it in. So step 1 is formula. Step 2, label. Step 3, plug them in. So area is going to equal base, which is 3 1/4, 3.25. And remember, when they're right beside each other, that means times height, which is 6. So we're going to grab the handy dandy calculator one more time over here. Bring it down a little bit. 3.25 times 6 equals 19.5. 19.5. So the area of this parallelogram is 19.5 0.5. And again, because you multiply two dimensions, right, your base and your height, it's going to be centimeters squared. Okay? All right, we're going to move down to the next one, but in order to do that, I've got to clear this out. So if you need to pause the video to make sure you have all this written down, please do so now. I'm going to clear it out. And we are going to scroll down to the next piece. Okay, so we have trapezoid. Now we do have a formula for trapezoid right here. It's on the second line. For area, half the height times the sum of the bases. But we don't have one for perimeter. That's okay. Remember, perimeter is just the sum of all the sides. Now, just a side note here, this trapezoid is called an isosceles trapezoid because these two side pieces are the same length, 21 and 21. So this is called an isosceles trapezoid when they're the same, just like an isosceles triangle. So to find perimeter, we simply add up all of our sides. We don't need the 19 right now, right? Because that's our height, so we don't need that. We just need the length of the four sides. And just to give you a hint or an idea, they don't always have to be the same, the two side pieces. They could be different lengths, so just be careful with that. So we have 21 plus 55 plus another 21 plus a 28 here at the bottom. And we're going to grab the calculator. Clear that out. 21 plus 55 plus 21 plus 28. And that gives us 125. So the perimeter is going to be 125 inches. Okay, and there's your inches. So 125 inches. Very good. Now, we already decided our area, right? It's over here, right there. Area equals half the height times the sum of the bases. So base 1 plus base 2. The very first thing you do is copy that over here. And yes, you will get a formula sheet for your test. You'll get it for the SOL anytime you need it. So it's half the height times the sum of the bases. Base 1 plus base 2. Okay, so step 1, formula. Step 2, label. So now we need to label our height and our two bases. Those are our variables that we need to know. Change color here. Our height is our vertical line, this dotted line. That's always your height when you're dealing with anything other than, you know, rectangles or squares or something that already have straight lines. Anything with a slanted line, triangles, trapezoids, parallelograms, they have to give you this dotted line. So that's our height. It honestly does not matter what you make base 1, base sub 1, or base sub 2. I just always put the base 1 on top. It honestly does not matter. All right, so we did step 2. We labeled. Step 3, plug it in, and we're going to do the math. Very easy 3-step process, and it's every time for any shape. So 1/2 times the height times the sum of the two bases. So we have 55 plus 28. Now, order of operations. Divide, multiply, multiply, parentheses. We got to do this first. So let me get my calculator. And we have, clear that out, 55 plus 28. That gives us 83. And I'm going to leave the calculator up here because I'm going to need it again. And remember, when you have a number right beside parentheses, that means times. So now we have 1/2 times 19 times 83. And this you can put right into the calculator just as it's written. So 1 divided by 2 which is 0.5, times 19 times 83. 788.5. So the area of this trapezoid is going to be 788.5 inches. And again, we multiplied base and height. We had to add the two bases, but we still multiplied just two dimensions, so it's inches squared. This is going to come in handy knowing if it's squared or something else when we get to our 3D shapes. All right, last one on this sheet, circles, okay? So again, if we come over here and look at our circles, which is at the end of the top row, we have our diameter go straight across, our radius is just half, circumference equals 2 pi r, and area equals pi r squared. So they tell you, if you look right here, perimeter means circumference. That is one and the same when it comes to a circle. So if they say, I went all the way around the circle, how far did I go? That's your circumference. That's all the way around. Area would be how much gray did I paint the inside of a circle. That would be your area. So let's go ahead and we are going to write down, since we do have a formula now, we're going to write down our formula for circumference, which is 2 pi r. 2 times pi times radius. Remember, you are always going to use 3.14. Don't use your pi key because it gives you like 10 digits, and that's way too much to worry about for rounding. So just 3.14. All right, label. So since this only goes halfway, this is actually the radius. A diameter would go all the way across. This is just halfway, so that is our radius. Now that we've labeled and we have our formula, let's plug in our information. So we're going to have 2 times, we decided P was 3.14, times our radius, which for this example is 5. So you get your calculator and you say 2 times 3.14 times 5, and that gives you 31.4. 31.4 is the circumference. That means if I start here and I walk all the way around this circle, I would get 31.5 feet in this case. 31.5 feet. So circumference equals 0.4, my bad, 0.4 feet. And the reason it's not feet squared is we just used radius one time, right? We didn't multiply more than one dimension. Now area, we decided, is going to be pi r squared. Well, we didn't decide. Some mathematician way long ago decided. And that's the formula for area of a circle. We already have everything labeled, so that's easy. Now we just need to plug it in. 3.14 times radius squared, so that's 5 squared. Now please be careful. I have a lot of kids that want to say, oh, 3.14 times 5 and then square it. No ma'am, no sir. You must do your exponent first. That's why you learned GEMDAS like years ago. So 5 squared is 5 times 5, which is 25. Now you can multiply pi, or 3.14. There's my decimal. Now you can multiply those two things together to get area. So again, let me grab my calculator here. Well, that's kind of messy. Let's see. Can I put it over here? All right. I'm trying to put it right here. Okay, clear this out. Now I'm going to say 3.14 times 25. And I get 78.5. 78.5 is my area. And because I used feet squared, right? I did multiply two dimensions, the radius to itself. It's going to be feet squared. Okay? So that's that worksheet. If you have any questions, let me know. There's one more thing I want to show you on the formula sheet before I let you go. I'm going to clear this out real quick, so if you need to pause the video, pause it now. Write down what you need. I want to show you one thing. If you forget what pi is, at the bottom here of the formula sheet, look, they tell you what pi is. Pi is 3.14 or 22/7. I don't really think there'll come a time when you need the fraction for pre-algebra. Maybe when you get to algebra, definitely when you get to geometry, you might need this more, the fraction version. For this year, if you just use 3.14, you should be fine. It also helps you with telling you, okay, the little p, that's perimeter. So if you forget what some of these letters are, you can look down here to see if they have the answer for you. All right. I am going to, this is going to be the end of the first part of the notes with just the basic shapes. The next video will show you how to do composite shapes. Those are our mashups, how to find the area and perimeter of those things. Thanks for watching.